Welcome to Building Tactics. In this video I'm going to show you how I built a 20 foot by 22 foot carport for $3,300. Let's get started. I start by removing the layer of grass so I can put gravel down. I then check the level of the site with a laser transit to see how much drop it is from one corner to the other. I do this all the way around the outside of the area I'm going to put the carport. Now I'm making small batter boards to square up the carport with strings. I just drive 2 stakes in the ground and then I put a small piece of wood across. Then I line up the string with the string on the ground and I mark it on the batter boards and put a screw in it. Now I measure from the screw I put in down 22 feet and I make a mark on the other batter board. And this gives me the distance from the string I just ran down to the next string. I repeat this process for each end of the building. I measure from batter board to batter board, get my distance and make a mark, put a screw in, and I run the string line to the other end. Next, I drive a stake where the 2 strings intersect. Since I'm working by myself, I need something to measure off right where the strings come together. So I place the string on this stake so I can pull my cross measurements to see if I'm square. I measure from one corner to the opposite corner and I get a measurement. So this ended up being about 1 inch out of square. So I move back about a 1/2 inch on 2 ends and I remeasure my cross measurement. I adjust the screw to where it intersects to make sure that it's correct and adjust for the 1/2 inch I just moved it. Now I'll get another cross measurement. So I go to the opposite corner and I do a cross measurement from there to the other corner. These two measurements should equal out to be the same. Here I am about a 1/4 inch difference, so that means that I'm only 1/8 inch out of square. So I got my length and my width, and I've adjusted the distance I needed to, and I got the cross measurements, and it's within an 1/8 inch of square, so we're good to go. Now I measure for my 2 posts on this side. Each side has 4 posts. From the corner I'm measuring 7'4" to this post. This pin represents the center of the post. And then I measure 7'4" to the center, from that post to the center of the other post. So the post will sit in the center of this pin and to the inside of this line. And I do this on the other side also. Now I use post hole diggers to dig out the holes for the posts. I use a scrap piece of 6x6 to check to make sure that the hole is big enough and in line with where the post needs to go. I dig out extra dirt to make sure there's enough concrete around the post. I repeat this process on all the corners and all the posts that are marked. So on this corner is lower than the others by about 14 inches. So I can't go as deep on this corner. I'm going to have at least 24 inches in the ground. So what I'm going to do is, this lower corner here has got some backfill. So I'm going to pour on all these posts. I'm going to pour 6 inches of concrete, let it set up, and then put the post in, level it up, and pour the concrete around it. And the reason I do that is the post is not sitting on the dirt. Like in this corner, if the dirt gives a little bit, the weight of the building may push the post down, even with a little concrete around it. So what I'm going to do is, I've got this corner here down 30 inches. I'm going to pour 6 inches of concrete, let it set up, then place my post. And this will be the low end. So I will, from the top of this post, I will get my grade or my level with the transit and mark the rest of the post out and cut those off. And on the bottom, as you can tell, I've made it a little bit bigger than what I need, and that is to give it a little bit more support. My pad on the bottom, a bigger foundation to help with the fill dirt, and also going to have more concrete around the post. That's also going to help with stability and keep it from sinking. we're back on the carport build. I want to show you what I got started this morning. I got to turn the camera on. I've got my first post up. I have a total of 8 posts, 4 on each side. So what I've done, I put my post up in line with my line, and I'm leaving just a little bit, maybe an 1/8 inch on each side of the line. That one there is a little, yeah, there's a little space there. And that way I don't pull my line one way or the other. And basically I just leveled up and braced it off in 2 directions. The 2x6 going that way, that's basically going to be put up, and it's going to brace the next 2 posts. These are all just temporary till the concrete sets up. What I'm going to do now is set up the next 3 posts on this side and brace them off. Then I'll move to the other side and do the same thing. As you can see, I have a 2x4 in the post hole. This helps as I raise the post, helps it go in smoother. It also helps keep from debris and dirt from falling in the hole as I raise the post up. Sure I don't need a longer post, so I took a piece of wood, put on the top of the the low end post and got a level mark with my transit, and I came up to the high end post, which is where I need the clearance from pontoon boat. I need at least 8.5 feet. So I'm making sure that the low end post is going to be high enough to get the clearance that I need. And what I will do is I will measure from the ground up to that mark and take 7.5 inches off for my 2 bait and see if it's going to work. Now I'm marking the level on each post. I use my laser transit and mark the level that I got off the low end post. That way all the posts are cut at the same height and everything is level. Okay, here's what we got so far. I have a double 2x8 beam all the way around the perimeter of this carport. As you can see, the 2x8s rest on the post. All the posts are notched out, so the 2x8s can rest on it. It's done like that all the way around. So my next step is I'm going to be laying it off 2 feet centers, starting here and going down to the end, 2 foot on center. First I'm going to be putting on the rafter ties and then the rafters. So I'm going to walk you through how I do that next. Okay, so now I'm going to be cutting the ends of my rafter ties so that this corner is not sticking up above the rafter. So I have calculated my distance from top plate to the top of the rafter where the bird's mouth is. It's about 4.5 inches. I'm going to be doing a 512 roof pitch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little extra off and go 4 inches up, and I'm going to make a mark, and then I'm going to put an angle at 512, a long 512. So basically can only go there, 512, so I'm going to make me a mark here, and then I'm going to come up, put my square even with that mark, and as you can see it's just a little bit above that, so what I will do, I'll angle my pencil and keep it at the same angle. both sides, and then I'm going to use one for a pattern. So I'll just lay it on top of the other ones and mark it. And then when I put my rafter up there, that corner is not sticking above it. Now I have gravel I need to spread out so I'll have room to work. I use my laser transit to make sure the gravel is level throughout the carport. Next, I mark the center for my ridge support. This is a 2x4 that's going to be holding the ridge in the center. I take a brace and I level it and brace it off. Next, I take a 2x4 and I place on top of the rafter ties in the center, and I mark 2-foot centers and nail the 2x4 into the rafter ties. This helps brace them and keep them from moving side to side. I do this all the way to the end. Next, I install the ridge board. I attach it to the ridge board support. This carport has 2 2x6 that makes up the ridge board. I put on a small brace and level the ridge board support, and the brace keeps it from moving side to side. I have the ridge board centered and level, so now I measure each side from the top corner of the 2x8 beam to the ridge board. Now that both of those measurements are equal, I measure out for the rafter. I measure from the end that rests against the ridge board down to the bird's mouth. And I take my square and I mark out the bird's mouth. I also measure from the bird's mouth to the end of the rafter for the overhang. I dry fit the rafter and make sure it fits good. Then I use that rafter as a pattern. I mark out the other rafters using this pattern. That way all the rafters are the same size and equal. As a mark in the rafters, I check what is called the crown or the bow and make sure the crown is up on each rafter. Next, I install the rafters. I nail each rafter to the ridge board on each mark that I made, and I work my way to the end. Then I will come back and nail the other end of the rafter to the beam. Here I am securing a 2x6 to the 2x4s that's nailed to the rafter ties. This helps give it strength and helps prevent sagging of the rafter ties. So I wanted to show you what we've got here so far. We have all the rafters on but one. I came up short yesterday, had to go get one. I'll put it on in a few minutes. But this is the ridge support, and there's the ridge beam going across, and all the rafters are nailed in. I have an angle brace right here and one down there. This keeps it from moving side to side. On the bottom, where this is a long span, I have this 2x6 nailed to a 2x4. The 2x4 is nailed into the ceiling joist. I have 3 or 4 nails on each one, and then nail into the side. And this 2x6 here is going to give it a little support from sagging, and give it side to side support, so the joist, rafter ties or ceiling joists don't move. So next, as you see right there in the center, that's my ridge board broke right there, so I have a support there. Have it nailed in to the bottom plate and the side there. So every 4 feet I'm going to put one of those in, and that helps with the sagging. If I come off the ridge board down and tie into this, it's going to give it support. It's going to support the rafter ties from sagging, and it's going to tie the roof in better. It's going to give it a lot more support and strength. And I want to do this before I put my plywood on, because once I put all that weight up there, I don't want it to give any at all when I put the plywood on, which I don't think it would, but just want to make sure. So on the gable ends from that center support, I'll be going over 2 foot and putting in some vertical 2x4s for support and for nailers on my gable end. Next, I install a 2x6 fascia board. I use my speed square to make sure that the fascia board is not sticking up higher than the rafter. I have installed two 2x4 braces on each side. This is to help hold the end overhang rafter while I secure it. This rafter is basically like the other rafters, except it doesn't have a bird's mouth and it is 3/4 of an inch longer. The 3/4 of an inch is to compensate for the ridge board, as both of these overhang rafters will secure together. Prepared to install the OSB sheathing on the roof. First thing I do is I measure up 48 1/4 inch and I chalk a line across. The reason I measure up 48 1/4, if I were to measure just 48, because of the angle of the roof, there would be a little bit of OSB hanging over the fascia. So I measure 48 1/4, and this gives me enough clearance for the fascia and the OSB. I measure the same 48 1/4 on the other end, and I snap my chalk line. And this is where the top edge of the OSB is going to be. As I put down each piece of OSB, I mark 24 inch to each of the rafters. This helps me keep the rafters in line as I install the OSB. Now I'm pulling up the OSB to the chalk line, and I secure it on each of the rafters. Once I do that, I get enough nails in it, I can actually walk on it and finish nailing it. I'm going to take time to stress that I do not recommend that you put the OSB sheathing on the roof by yourself. It's always best to have someone help you and to start at the bottom and install the OSB before getting on the roof, unless you have experience of doing this way, because the risk of injury is higher when you install it this way. So on this roof, I decided to start my runs of OSB with a 3-foot piece and a 5-foot piece. This is because of the 1-foot hangover. This allows me to use one piece of OSB to get the beginning of 2 runs. Normally, I would have used a 7-foot piece and a 5-foot piece. So by using a 3-foot and a 5-foot, I'm able to get the beginning of 2 runs off of one piece, which helps me save on material. After all the OSB sheathing is installed, I put down the roofing underlayment. This is the synthetic type underlayment. Normally you would use button caps to put this underlayment down. I decided to use roofing nails with a pneumatic gun. Also check your local building code, your project specs, and underlayment warranty to see which is required. Next, I cut the shingles for the beginning of each course. I get these measurements from the manufacturer's recommendations. I measure and determine how many courses of each shingle I will need to get me to the ridge of the roof. And I do the same thing for the other side. As I put each of these shingles down in the order that they go, it makes the pattern for the shingles as I work my way across the roof. Here I am installing the drip edge on the bottom fascia side. Normally I put the bottom piece under the underlayment, and then I put the rake side piece over the underlayment. I make a notch in the rake side drip edge. This is to meet the profile of the bottom drip edge. I make sure that I pull the drip edge in snug and not too tight, as it will make it difficult to put the fascia trim on. I also nail all the way up the edge at 12 to 16 inches apart. Now I start installing the shingles. I start by putting down a whole shingle, and then I continue up with the end pieces that I cut earlier. As I go up, each row will be approximately 6 inches or so shorter than the prior one. And then once I use up all those pieces, then I step back and just place whole shingles up till it's time to start using the cut pieces again. Next, I snap a chalk line. This is to help keep the shingles in line as I go up. I do this after I do 6 courses. I'll measure and put a chalk line down, and that way I make sure that I'm in line as I go across the roof. As I start the other side of the roof, I put down starter shingles. These shingles are to help with the first course of shingles to prevent water from getting through the seams. And I also put starter shingles up the rake side with the tar line pointing out. This helps secure the shingles down on the edge. The shingles on the rake side are lapped over the bottom course of starter shingles. I'll do this across each side and along the bottom. I overhang the starter shingles over the drip edge about a 1/2 inch. Check your shingle manufacturer recommendations to see how much overhang they recommend. As I get to the end, I measure and cut each shingle for each course until I get to the top. I use a piece of scrap shingle to lay under the shingles as I cut them. This avoids any damage to the shingles I've already installed. So that has all the shingles installed. Next, I have to install the ridge caps. Okay, now what I'm doing is cutting my ridge caps. There's different ways to do this. You can buy shingles that are for ridge caps. I always take 3 tab shingles and make 3 ridge caps out of each. Even with 3 tabs, some people will just cut them square and put them on like that. The way I like to do it is make a cut and break it off. And I basically cut it at an angle where each tab is and on the ends. So you end up with this. The reason I do this is if you cut it square, there's a little small tab that sticks out. So I just cut them at an angle. To me, they go on a lot better. Okay, what I'm doing now, I'm getting my cap centered up, and I'm going to make a mark with my knife. I don't have someone helping me today, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut just a little groove here where my line goes, and I'll take and put my chalk line right in there. So what I need to do is I'm going to pull a chalk line all the way down, and then I'll lay the cap on the chalk line and nail it. Doing this, but we'll see how it works out. So I've cut one cap in half. I'm going to use this piece on the end to give me a tar line on the end, and I'm going to use the other piece on the other end to cover up the last ridge cap. So what I do once I get started, I basically line up the edge. I've got this even with the outside edge, and I come down to where I can see my mark, and I pop me a couple nails in it, make sure it's behind the tar line. Out there where it's at. And I'll keep repeating this process until I get to the end. Next, I frame up the ends with 2x4s. I measure from the center ridge beam support over 24 inches on center in each direction. And I cut these 2x4s with a 5/12 pitch on one end. This gives me nailers to secure the OSB and the D-log siding. So my next measurement is 17 1/4 long end. So I'm going to measure down 17 1/4 and I'm going to make it square. This is the piece that I cut off the last cut I made for the last piece. So it already has the 5/12 pitch on it. So I can just go from the long end to square and my piece should work out right. Now I install the OSB sheathing on the gable ends. To get the angle of the cut for the OSB, I just measure up the height from the bottom up to approximately an inch below where the roof is, and then I measure it on both sides, and that gives me the angle. I just simply chalk a line and cut it, and the piece should fit. So I've measured 10 3/4, which is my measurement. Now I'm going to take a piece. This is just a scrap piece. It's got a long 5/12 angle on it. This came off of one of the ends that I put up. So basically I'll line it up on the bottom and bring my point of the piece of OSB out to there, and I'll mark it on the inside, and that should be the angle that I need for the bird box. So now I'm going to install the F channel. This is the channel that the vinyl soffits will sit in on this side. That's what will hold the soffit up. So from the bottom of this tube support came down 3/4 inch. That's the distance between this thickness of this F channel. So I'll run this F channel along this blue line that I've chalked, which is 3/4 inch down, bottom of the F channel. On this piece, I've had to notch out about 14 inches or so of the nailing to go underneath this. So what I'll do after that is I'll put a couple screws in it, hold it. On the gable end F channel, I just simply measured down the width of the 2x6 fascia, which is 5.5 inches, and I add 3/4 of an inch, which makes it 6 1/4. I then chalk a line and put the bottom of the F channel on the line and nail it. So now I have the blade on my saw turned backwards. This helps with cutting the vinyl. I do highly recommend when you cut this vinyl to wear safety glasses. You should always wear them when you're using the saw, but definitely when you're doing this, because these little pieces will get in your eye. So I've measured 11 1/8, and I've made a square mark with my framing square. Keeping the two pieces together, I slide it down about the distance that I'm going to be cutting off. Clear my board. Make another mark, 11 1/8. Square it off. So as I'm cutting slowly so I don't force the blade, which could cause it to chip. And also, whenever you move the pieces, just make sure they stay together at the end before you cut. And I keep repeating this until I get all the pieces that I need cut. You can use a miter saw, turn the blade around backwards. That's fairly easy. It's a little quicker than the skill saw. This small of a job, I'm just using the skill saw because for me it's just quicker. You can use your tin snips, which takes a lot longer, a lot more. It wears your hands and your forearm out, doing all those cuts. You can also make a jig. That's probably the quickest way, is to take a few minutes to build your jig and use it to cut your pieces. I usually cut just 2 pieces at a time. That way, as I'm cutting, they're not getting out of line. I can keep them lined up better that way. If I have 4 or 5, as you go, you might get them off a little bit. So I usually do 2. If I have a jig, I just do 1. As I nail each piece of soffit, I make sure that I don't drive the nail all the way up. I leave about a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch of the nail sticking out for expansion of the soffit. Next, I cut the aluminum coil to bend the fascia trim. To cut the aluminum, I just measure my distance and I use a square to square it up, and then I use a utility knife and make about 2 or 3 scores with the knife, and then I bend the metal and it will break on the line. Good sharp and give it a good score. So scored a couple times. Has a white side and a brown side. I want the brown facing out, obviously. I'll come and I'll make me a 1-inch mark on both sides. Close, and then I pull it tight till I fine tune the lines. So I'm going to give it a 90-degree bend. So on this piece, I need to cut a 5/12 angle. I'll take my speed square. I line up the pivot point to the end of the metal, bring my common cut to 5, and then from there I mark a line. So what I'm going to do in addition to that is, on this bottom, I'm going to step back 3/4 of an inch on the bottom cut of the line that I just made for the angle. I'm stepping back 3/4 of an inch. So take my 10 snips and I cut on the flat, the bottom side, that 3/4 inch back mark. Then from there, I'm going to cut score the metal on the line for the angle. I just simply take my knife and give it a little score right along that line. Take my time and I stay on that line. And I score it a couple times. So after that, I just start bending it, and it's eventually going to start breaking, coming apart. Once I get it started, I'll just lift it up and rip it off of there. So now, I take it, flip it over, and I take my knife, and on the inside, where I made the cut, the 2 cuts in between it, I just give it a good score a couple times, and then bend, and it will break off. So what you end up with is this. You have that angle with about 3/4 back. So when I put this up there, it's going to overlap the center by about 3/4 inch, and that way the next piece will come to here and it will not have an exposed edge. So now I take a brown aluminum trim nail, and I'm going to nail along this piece about every 12 to 16 inches. Make sure it's pushed up real good. So next I need a 27-inch piece on the bottom. That's to the long point of the 5/12 angle. So I put my pivot point on the end, line my 5/12 up, and I make a mark. And what I mean by long point is this angle has a long point and a short point. My measurement is to the long point of the angle. So I measured back 27 inches. So I got to make this cut and this cut. You can make these cuts with a set of 10 snips. I like to use a knife. To me, it makes a cleaner cut. It's a little bit more difficult to make this cut this way, but to me it looks better. So when I put the fascia piece on, I'm going to leave this piece loose when I put it on, and when I put the other one on the fascia side, it'll have a bend in it, and it'll go underneath this piece, so there's no exposed edge. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure this from the inside and make my cut on the inside. And the way I do that is just simply hook onto the end, the long end, measure down 27 inches, take my square, and I'll make a mark. So now I'll take my tin snips up and I'll cut the bottom edge. And again, I'm going to take my knife and make the cut. I could use tin snips, but I'll do it this way. And the reason is, when I do tin snips, for example, I'll use this piece when I make cuts. Sometimes there's little waves in it, which is fine if you don't go all the way to the end like that and then start over, which will make an even bigger wave in it. So that's when I can. That's why I like to use my knife to make the cuts, because I just simply bend it and it breaks. So now I have to notch out for the bird box. So what I will do, I'll take this piece up there, dry fit it, and I will mark this piece here and make a cut with my tin snips, and then a long cut along the bottom edge. So basically, I've taken and I've marked where the bird box is, and I just cut out the bend. We'll score it with a knife a couple times and bend it. Cut here with your tin snips and it breaks off. So this piece will fit over this part where the bird box is. And here I'm going underneath this piece. So next I'm going to do the bird box. I'm basically going to measure from this end to this corner, and from this corner even with the plywood here. And I'll put a bend in this metal. I'll also measure the width, because it's going to be this particular roof, it's going to be a little bit different than this measurement here. Now double check. So taking the tin snips, I'm going to make a cut. This is basically my cut line, and this is my bend line. I like to put them on a 45-degree angle. You don't have to, you can do it as long as you've got just a small angle there, that's all that matters. So I've made that cut. I'm going to cut out the notch for the 45, this helps it bend. So you end up with that. So when this bends over, the 45 is going to be covering this piece here. Actually make just a little bit of a cut there. So I have my cut here, and I have the two lines. So I'm going to score this line a couple times with my knife. And again, you can cut it with tin snips. I just like the better look of using a knife, because you bend it, you break it. So this line, it's going to bend, so I'm just going to give it a light score. A real light score on one side, the inside. Now I'm going to take a block of wood and pull this one in just a little bit. Take a block of wood. You can also use, demonstrate with the speed square. You can also use your speed square, but you want to leave enough room for this piece to go in behind that one. And you're going to bend it up, give it a good bend, and then you end up with the corner. You end up with the bend in the metal. And as you can see with my 45, some people put 45, some do it just square. So I have a 45 there. Okay, next I'm going to be installing the D-log siding on the gable ends. I'm going to be using 8-inch D-log, and I'm going to be fastening it with a 16 finish nail. And the reason I'm using this 16 finish nail is I like using them better because it doesn't show the nail as much as, say, a galvanized ring shank nail with a head on it, or from a nail gun. You still have that more of the head exposed. This is going to give me plenty penetration through the OSB and into the studs. I'll be nailing one on the top, one on the bottom. Different manufacturers recommend different nailing patterns. Some people just nail them on the top tongue. If this D-log had, there is some that has a groove there that you put in the piece above, it locks it in, and you don't have to nail the bottom, but this one doesn't, so it needs a nail on the bottom and a nail on the top. And I'll nail it into this, because if I nail into this thin piece, it's not really holding much, so I like to come down about 1 inch and put a nail in a little bit more wood, and it likes to splinter sometimes when you get close to this edge, whether you're doing it by hand or with a nail gun. You can also use the 2 or 3 inch staples. They have staples that you use with a pneumatic gun. They do okay, but when you face nail them into the board, it exposes more of the staple, just like the nail heads. So that's why I use these 16 galvanized finish nails. I install the D-log siding unfinished. One of the reasons I do it this way is the stain will help seal where the nail has penetrated the wood. soffit and D-log siding on the front of the carport. Now all I have to do is give that D-log and the post good staining. Okay, that's it for now. The only thing I may do in the future is add gutters and maybe vinyl soffit in the ceiling of the carport. But other than that, this project is done. If you can, like and subscribe to our channel. And thanks for watching Building Tactics.